You're listening to Going Deep with Aaron Watson.
Get down.
You're going deep.
You are now listening to episode 385 of Going Deep with Aaron Watson. I am simultaneously recording an Instagram story and the intro to my podcast because I am a multitasking dynamo. I'm recording with my co-founder, Hannah Phillips, and we're recording today because we had a guest who was intended to be here who no call, no showed, and that is the essence of the entrepreneurial experience that happens, and you roll with the punches and you make the best of it. So what we decided to do is record a podcast about what it's been like to be in business for
a year and a half almost.
A year and a half. That podcast will be up. Oh, see, now it's breaking from the podcast concept. I'm going to turn to Instagram stories and say, this podcast will be up in a couple weeks. Hope you listen to it. Now you, loyal listener, who sat through all of that, I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening to this podcast. I appreciate those of you that have supported my endeavors and my efforts in some way, shape, or form, whether that is by becoming a client of Piper's, whether that is by attending the Going Deep Summit, or perhaps simply engaging with the content that I happen to share on the interwebs. I'm sure that my co-founder, Hannah, is equally thankful for your support.
So thankful.
As a way of going about hoping to provide you more value for your valuable attention that you share with us, I want to talk with Hannah about the lessons that we've learned and primarily take aim at the least sexy, least enjoyable aspects of what we do. And the reason for that is I think it's very easy to gloss over those details. I think it's very easy to miss that in the curated feed, in the look at me, I'm so honored to have recently accomplished this little thing nature of the posting and the sharing, but not even in the digital sense, in the real world. You show up at the thing, oh, we're killing it. Everything's perfect. Life is good, yada, yada. And you miss some of the little gritty details that are the reality of getting something off the ground. And the reality is that you and I have been up to this for a year and a half. And over that course of time, there have been some very good days. There have been some very frustrating and bad days. So let's start off with, if I ask you to reflect on the hardest or one of the hardest days of the last year and a half with Piper, what comes to mind?
Oh, man. That's so tough. So just the way my brain works, I do not actively remember
Good.
bad days. So I'm going to have to think about this one for a sec. Does anything come to mind for you immediately?
I would say that there have been moments, so we haven't really lost many clients. I would say that in the instances where that has happened, those have been some of the more unpleasant days. And that is the nature of being in a client services business. That is the nature of, we've had clients who've had to stop service with us through no issue with what we produced or what we did for them, but their own business fluctuations have caused a lot of stress. I can tell you actually what my worst day was. My worst day was we had a situation where we had over $20,000 in outstanding invoices due.
Yep.
And when you put out invoices, you put out terms around the period of time in which they are payable. And we had multiple clients go past those terms into a later period. And there was a point at which we didn't even necessarily make payroll. This was a point where it was you, me, and Tori. Mm-hmm. And I forewent my pay at that point in time. And in order to compensate both you and Tori, we were basically at the bottom of the barrel. And if some unexpected expense had come up, that would have gone on the credit card without an immediate avenue with which to pay it off. And that caused me an immense amount of stress that was massively unpleasant to, the nature of how I operate is to take full responsibility for everything in the business, but particularly the, quote unquote business dev elements of payment and sales and the actual revenue that comes in the door. You aren't responsible for that. You are responsible for the fulfillment of a lot of client obligations and a lot of stuff as it pertains to Piper's own branding and marketing collateral. And so to tell you, to tell Tori, to have, because we were very transparent about it, but there was still shame associated with that. And there was stress around our simultaneous aspirations for growth, because you heard the number. I was transparent with it, over $20,000 in outstanding invoices. To have those type of numbers coming in and simultaneously no cash in the bank is this extreme polarity of good things and bad things. And that is, that will stay with me for a long period of time and is, at least at this point in time, unequivocally the worst day that I've had with Piper.
Interesting. Yeah, that is, and I remember just like, I think we probably had one of our Saturday morning meetings, and I remember how stressed out you were. And what's fascinating to me is, even though we are co-owners of the business, co-founders of the business, we're equally bought in, that stuff does not stress me out nearly as much as you. And maybe it should, but what stresses me out is communication issues around the actual production of the content.
And that's because it's your responsibility.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, and this isn't like a disparaging thing, it's just those things are my responsibility, so it should stress me out more.
Right.
And it really speaks to, I think really what's embedded in that statement is the trust that you have in me, simultaneously the trust that I have in you. And my trust in, okay, we have this big client, we're supposed to fulfill it, HPU got it. Like, there's very little oversight on my end, and that's maybe an interesting insight into how Piper operates. But yeah, I think trust is a powerful thing. It's
a very powerful thing. Yeah. And it's so weird. I always go back to this, but it is so weird that it was never an issue, even though we didn't really know each other that well before we started Piper.
Not at all.
At all. Like, we were acquaintances, and you asked me to start a business with you. And I was just thinking about this earlier today, about how crazy it was that, like, I could have been the most insufferable person to be around, and it could have gone to shit for both of us.
But at the same time, that would have revealed itself, because it wasn't like we were strangers. I had asked you to create the logo for the Going Deep Summit. You had done that promptly. I'd asked you to create the logo for the book that I thought I was writing that I never completed, and you did that promptly, and you did it well. And then you took the photos from the summit, and even though One Talk's photos were lost, they still looked really good. And there was, an ease to working with you that was apparent. And even in the conversations that happened well before I actually asked you to start the business with me, you had immediately understood the concept of it. Mm-hmm. And there's so much that's like the thing that is really hard for me to articulate is that, like, when someone gets one thing and you understand they really get it, it's a big idea, all the embedded assumptions within that thing that they get tells you so much about the person. So when I said we're going to be a company that vlogs ourselves from day one, and we're going to help other companies vlog themselves, or maybe that's not exactly what I said, but when you got it in less than 2 seconds, it told me so much about not just your business sense, what you're consuming. Like this is an oversimplification, but I knew you followed Kelsee Neistat and his YouTube channel, but in general, to have known that you did those vlogs, I had consumed a few of those vlogs, to know that you were consuming those sources told me that you at least had the framework for what some people who were really innovative were doing. And that was, that's like 80-90% of it. We don't have to be the exact same sense of humor. We don't have to be the exact same favorite sports or all those like little things, in the same way that in a romantic relationship, those things aren't really fundamentally essential. What's fundamentally essential is the core values and the core, maybe not intelligences, but like sensibilities about how the world works.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I realized way later after starting Piper, and when I've gone deep into analyzing this for myself, like, man, why do we click so well, and why are we such good business partners? But I think a big thing for me early on before we started Piper was I had an art show at a yogurt shop.
Yep.
And you showed up.
Yeah.
And you and Ashley came, you told me about your idea for the Going Deep Summit. The Going Deep Summit wasn't even a thing. You were in the process of making it. It was the August before.
I had already
first
explained it wasn't Piper yet, but I had explained the idea for the business.
Yes.
And then the next step was telling you about the idea for the summit. And I think that the way I approached that was, number one, I didn't really know people who were like doing art shows. Like I wasn't Tori Meglio and
exactly. You weren't
in
into
with
the
art
art scene
world at all. I didn't understand any of that stuff. And so I didn't want to see what that was about. I had already pitched you on the idea, and I ended up using your services to create the logo and the photography, and like I kind of wanted to just have that conversation and see if you'd be interested.
Yeah.
But then there was already the context of I think I'm gonna try to start this company, and I think Hannah's gonna be the co-founder, but like I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was another instance of getting more data to make an informed decision.
Yeah, but it just like I guess it goes to show for me that showing up actually matters.
Of course.
Like you had no reason aside from the ones you just articulated for like coming to some 19-year-old's art show that was in a yogurt shop. It was like the most bizarre thing to me that anyone who wasn't family showed up at all. And I distinctly remember the non-family members who did, and I am extremely grateful for those people. But it's one of those things that like the seed was planted so early on, and it just showed what kind of person you are. Yeah.
So do you have a worst day of the business, or do you have a particularly painful element?
There have been days, and I don't actually remember specific days, but there have been different points throughout Piper that I've either felt very overwhelmed with client work or very overwhelmed with the stuff that I'm supposed to produce for our in-house content. And whatever Piper content I produce, I'm never overly stressed out about like deadlines, because I know those deadlines are somewhat flexible because it's our own stuff.
Yeah.
For clients, whenever things have been backed up, that stresses me out in a very big way, because up until a month and a half ago, I was the only creative producing visual content for our clients.
Right.
And there have just been a couple of times where I have felt stressed out about that, but nothing to the extent of like, man, that was just a miserable stint. It's always because I think it's just the way I am. Like I snap myself out of things very easily and quickly.
Yeah, and I'm going on a trip this summer.
Yes.
And this will wrap back around to the point that you just made. It's my first time, and I'll still be connected in some way, shape, or form in parts of the trip, but to be away from the business and have it still exist without me. And that speaks to us. I use the analogy of we're out of infant stage and we're into toddler stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's still very breakable. It's there's plenty of things that are high risk, but it's less fragile than it used to be. And one of the big elements of that is the fact that AT, the fourth person for Piper, second person that we've hired to come on, is another creative. There is a sharing of that portion of the client workload. For clarity, I touch audio stuff, podcast stuff, but basically all visual stuff was on your end. Now AT can start to take some of that on, in addition to creative apprentices in like limited capacities doing stuff. And that has been one of the realizations for me in terms of what this can be and how it will be in the future, that there's more stress, because now when there's cash flow issues or things like I articulated before, it affects more people that I care about. People I care more deeply about than I used to care.
Right.
Not that I didn't, but it just continues to deepen with time. But at the same time, you can go so far when you have that team, and you can go fast alone, you can go far together is such an apt analogy, that our output as a 4-person full-time unit is bonkers to me when I like sit and really think and noodle on it. and it's only picking up, and it is a simultaneously scary and exciting thing in the sense that when it picks up, like, what are we going to do? But also there was so much work to just get the littlest bit of momentum going and the little bit of push happening to now see that start to click and have some actual inertia behind it is pretty darn exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
What else should people know about being 1.5 years into starting a business?
Having the right team is key, and I think a lot of people are doing great as being solopreneurs and just doing their own thing, but I have a plethora of weaknesses that were really starting to show when I was freelancing and doing my own thing before starting Piper.
Explain.
And so running HP Media for the year or so that I was at my full capacity, and I knew that I just hit a limit of growth, and I didn't want to believe that, but there's only so much that I could do as a single person trying to run an agency type business. Like I was running people's social media accounts. I was doing photo shoots and video shoots and graphic design. I was doing all of that on my own, and I wanted to make something so much bigger, but I just couldn't see myself doing it alone. And frankly, I'm not a natural salesperson. I hate touching anything around finance, and I just had no interest in doing the back end stuff, and it was like pulling teeth for myself to do that. And when the time came that I was actually starting to think about, okay, what are my next steps? How do I grow from here? That's when you came to me for Piper and asked me to be your business partner. It was the stars aligned in some way that I really can't explain, but the timing was absolutely perfect. And your strengths are my weaknesses. My strengths are your weaknesses. We just complete each other in a really good way. And so 1.5 years into the business, I am more fulfilled in my work than I ever have been. I love the people that we're surrounding ourselves with, and I know that I can rely on other people to do a better job at things that I'm not good at.
Yeah, it's like such a played out business truism, 1 + 1 = 3, but like it really feels that way.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, listeners, for listening to us make the best of, not even the best of a bad situation. We just made lemonade out of the lemons that we were given, and we hope that this was valuable for you. If you have questions about Piper Creative, we are rebooting a segment that we did a little bit in the early months of the business. We kind of strayed away from, but we now have a new framework about how to execute it called Piper Answers. If you would like your questions answered about being at this stage of business, we don't pretend to be titans of industry running multi-100 person, multi-thousand person corporations yet, but we do have some insights. We do have some learnings. I think in particular, some of our strengths have been around not just content creation, media production, digital media, but also around attracting talent. Those are the two things that I see us as really being differentiated in, particularly for something so young and so small, to have such tremendously talented creative apprentices in our midst, in addition to the full-time people, Tori and AT. We'd love to help other people with what we've learned in some small way, shape, or form. And thank you again so much for listening. And that goes up on Instagram. So follow Piper_creative on Instagram if you're not doing so already.
Peace.